everyone. Welcome to another episode of PSA with ASP. I'm New Orient, the Viking Union Gallery Director. And today I've got with me Amy Chaloupka from the Whatcom Museum. Amy, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks again for coming on. Like I said, I'm excited to get to talk to you a little bit more about yourself and your role at Whatcom. So could you let us know what you do at the Whatcom Museum, and could you describe a little bit of your arts background?
Sure. I'm the curator of art at the Whatcom Museum, and I've been there since early 2019. But I have been curating for more than 15 years and have worked with other institutions, mostly smaller museums in smaller communities. And I started out as an artist. I went to Western. So I've went through the art department at Western and was in the photography and mixed media departments and painting departments. And then I did a BFA here, and then I went out to the University of Wisconsin in Madison and studied sculpture there. I had never done sculpture at all as an undergrad, so I just applied for various schools, and that was one of the programs that I got into. And I was excited to go there because they had an element of teaching that I was able to do while I was there. So I was really excited about that. But I dove into a master's program in a media that I didn't know much at all about, so that was terrifying. But I eventually landed in a focus of working on installation-based work, continued to work with mixed media, and I was there, let's see, from 2003 to 2006, and when I graduated, it was a 3-year program, and I taught for 2 of those years undergrad courses, and I thought I was going to go into academia. I did a lot of writing when I was in graduate school and had to write a master's thesis that I had to defend, and I just thought I would become a professor. And when I graduated, I applied for a position at this museum called the Kohler Art Center, and it's in a small town called Sheboygan, Wisconsin, about an hour north of Milwaukee. And while I was in school, I would go up there often to see their exhibitions, and I just thought they had a really phenomenal exhibition program and were doing really challenging, interesting work in this small community. And there happened to be a position in their curatorial department that opened up when I graduated from school, and I applied for it, and I had to apply with writing samples, and I got the job. So I ended up staying in Wisconsin and moved to Sheboygan and worked there for 6 years in the curatorial department and curated a lot of exhibitions there. I mean, they originated all their programming in-house, so they had 3 curators on staff, and the exhibition schedule was really intense. I think we were doing 12 to 16 exhibitions a year between the 3 of us, so that was it gave me a lot of experience, and I worked on many different projects there. And they still do, they have a really phenomenal artist residency program there. And so, even though it was a small community, there were internationally known artists coming into Sheboygan all the time to attend the residency. And that really gave a lot of access to artists quite a bit while I was there. So then, let's see. Then I was there until 2012. I was pregnant with my second child. My husband and I were missing family in the Northwest. He's from Vancouver, BC, and I have family out here. So we did something stupid. We quit our jobs and we moved back to Bellingham and just said, we're going to move back to Bellingham. And that was the time we wanted to do it. So then we moved here. and then we slowly got rehired by our previous institutions on contract. So I ended up working remotely for the museum in Wisconsin from from Bellingham for several years, and I would fly out there and for installations and do Zoom meetings, which seems normal now, but at that time it just, it felt somewhat detached and difficult to curate exhibitions, and you're not in the community that you're curating for. So you just go in, you install, and you leave. So you never get to conduct curatorial tours or anything like that. So I think after a while, I started looking into curating within the region and working with museums around here. And so I was an independent curator for many years, and I worked with the Whatcom Museum and on contract, and they got to know me and I got to know them. And then when a position opened up, then in 2019, I was hired. So I interviewed for the position and was hired. So I'm thrilled to be working here and living in the community that I developed programming in. So that's kind of the long and short of it.
Yeah, you have a ton of experience. And it's interesting that you were able to maintain a position remotely as a curator. That seems especially challenging. We all know now how challenging that is. But yeah, it's really lucky that you're able to do what you're trained to do in a place as beautiful as Bellingham. And I feel like the community here is really ripe with, I don't know, not only artists, but people who are interested in consuming and participating in artwork. So that's awesome. When did you know that you wanted to work in the arts?
I always known. I mean, but I always came at it from, I didn't know that I wanted to curate, but I always knew that I wanted to make art and think about art. And my older sister, who's 13 years older than me, was an artist. And so I grew up observing someone who was passionate about making work, and that fed my interest in making art. And it's always been a passion of mine. I had teachers as an elementary school student who fed that passion, and that has blossomed as I've gotten older. And, I just have always had an appreciation for the arts. So, and materials and media. And I think curatorially, that's where I feel like I have a strong suit in really understanding making and what it takes to make work and material exploration.
So you mentioned a little bit ago that you make work yourself. Is that something that you're currently working on? Are you currently pursuing any art making?
Not steadily. I kind of draw still, but my practice was very, I don't know. I did a lot of site-specific installation work. So it was a lot of building components and then creating large installations. And so it was not a practice. It's not a practice that I could really maintain as I work full time, and just my lifestyle of having children and their needs, and that complicates things. So I think when I was curating early on, I was trying to maintain both the art and curating, and it just didn't work. It was not sustainable. So I always think about it though, and whenever I'm working with artists, I'm in the back of my head, I'm always thinking about projects that I like to work on and develop, and they're always constantly inspiring me in my creative thinking. And curating is very creative too in many ways, when you're designing spaces and thinking through some of the path that people will walk through an exhibition space, and how you link artworks together, how you link artists' themes together. There's a lot that feeds that side of my artistic mind that satisfies me in my day job, in my career. And so I haven't really felt like, like I need to get back to making work. But I still kind of feed it a little bit with some of the smaller scale drawing projects that I work on.
Yeah, I can only imagine how busy you must be. Yeah, in my very limited experience as the gallery director, something that I've come to really enjoy about being in a gallery space is determining that path through which people will interact with the artwork in there. And now that's something that I'm thinking about constantly, not just in art spaces, but in all spaces, restaurants, boutiques, whatever it is. I'm thinking about that now. So yeah, that's interesting to hear that that aspect of the job is what's feeding the creativity for you. That's got to be fun to play with. So what do you enjoy most about curating?
Well, I think working directly with artists is really my passion, and especially if they're drawn to site specificity in their work. I love that that engagement in projects that I've worked on in the past, and I love being involved at the beginning of when an idea is being formed, and it's so you can curate interesting shows with work that exists already, but oftentimes that work has already been written about and thought about by other writers and curators, and there's a lot of knowns and known variables in that work. But when an artist has the opportunity to create a brand new piece and it's pushing their practice and it's risk taking and there are unknowns, like that gets me really excited as a curator to be able to facilitate that or be part of that. In that it's scary for institutions to take projects like that on because there's a lot of unknowns, and I love taking projects like that on because it comes from my background as a maker and someone who loves installation based work. That's something that I love to see more of in museums.
Yeah. So this is something that I didn't think to write down in advance, but how do you approach, or I guess what is your current approach when you are facing something, say a new project, say a new site-specific work? How do you approach writing about that object or that show or that artist when it's brand new to you?
Well, I think that the writing sort of happens in tandem with the organization and in the communication with the artist. And there's been an interesting kind of evolution in the curatorial world about collaboration and writing and whose words are whose and being transparent about that, and it's definitely something that's really interesting to me. I work a lot more closely with artists now than perhaps I used to. There used to be sort of this divide between what the curator did and wrote in an exhibition and what the artist is doing, and that has changed a lot in the last 10 years, maybe even in the last 5 years. And so I work very closely with the artist to communicate and interpret, and I don't know. I see that more as a collaboration now than I ever did, especially if it's a solo exhibition, for sure.
What does that look like to interact with an artist so closely to work on like a shared goal, like an exhibition?
Well, it works differently in a pandemic. It's a lot of screen time, and that's really tough because you're not having a studio visit or a series of studio visits where you're physically in the space with the artist and their work, where you can touch and look through drawings or look through ideas, or So it's hard now, right now, to do that, but you know, it's a lot of conversation and back and forth, and um, discussing institutional goals, discussing the artist goals and how those can kind of come together. And just being just as communicative as possible. And sometimes artists don't want to communicate, as you know, they just want to focus on their work. So I think just gauging and understanding how much engagement an artist really wants to partake in versus, and obviously physically how much time they have. You know, they often barely have enough time to create and finish their work. So sometimes they're very hands off and they want to just work on that work, and that's great too. And it's just, it really comes down to each individual project. They're all different. They all kind of evolve and take shape in different ways depending on those conversations.
Yeah. So it actually kind of leads me to my next question, which is, how has the Whatcom Museum weathered the pandemic, and how have y'all overcome some of the obstacles that's come with moving things online?
Yeah, I think like many institutions, we've moved a lot of programming online, and that's been really good and challenging for us because that wasn't a priority prior to the pandemic, but it certainly is now. And you realize just how much more access you're providing through those programs online, and I think that's really something that will continue even after the pandemic's over. But you know, we shut down in March, and we had just opened an exhibition, so that was really unfortunate too. We had just opened a few exhibitions, so they hadn't been seen by many people before they had to be deinstalled. But fortunately, I had been working on a project that was drawing from almost entirely from our collection. So it was a recent acquisition exhibition, which allowed flexibility in terms of the fact that I wasn't dealing with a lot of loans. I wasn't borrowing work from institutions or galleries or artists. So even though we were closed, I continued to develop that project. And when we opened, we were able to open again in August. We were able to just install that show and keep it up in the gallery. And then we had to shut down again in November, but we could just keep the work installed. And then there was no timeline for when we had to deinstall that show. So there was a lot of flexibility, and that had already been on the books prior to the pandemic. So it was fortunate that it was a project that we could keep up and have the time to do a lot of programming around it online. So, you know, we are now open 50%, which for our spaces is actually quite a large amount of people can safely go through the galleries at a safe social distance. And so we don't have a reservation system. You can just show up and during our hours and come see the exhibitions. We just opened 2 new exhibitions. And so it's exciting to be back and, you know, inviting people in person and seeing artwork in person again is really, really nice.
Yeah, I haven't, I don't remember the last time I was able to be in a museum, but I'm looking forward to, I've been really curious about, there's an exhibition called Body of Work about tattoo culture at the Museum of like Pop Culture in Seattle. That I think opened before the pandemic and has just been, I'm assuming, on hiatus until now. So that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to, and just getting back into doing all of the things that Bellingham loves to do with artwork, you know, our art walks, the local spaces that have art. It's nice to see it all coming back. So yeah, that's exciting. And I'm glad that the institutions have found a way to make it work. I feel like, I don't know, there's part of me throughout this experience, the pandemic experience, has been like, well, we really shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, and that's true. But I've also found that speaking with my coworkers and students at Western, that people really want and need like an artistic, creative outlet, whether that be something that facilitates their making of an object or that facilitates their learning or engaging with an art object. So yeah, I don't know. It's been nice to see that museums are making it work and coming back, and I'm hoping to see more of online programming stick around precisely for that its accessible nature, like you mentioned. So considering all of those events, what is something that you've learned as a curator in the past year?
It's really hard to, I just feel like everybody's been so siloed that that's really, with colleagues working from home, and you have to really amp up your communication level to much greater than you would if you're just, in the next office, or you just miss all of those little conversations that you have in passing, and every email feels like you're kind of asking something, and I have email and Zoom fatigue. So I think just checking in more in different ways and trying to give myself a little bit of grace and time and to, there's no separation from work and life right now. And I think that really makes things hard. So personal wellness, prioritizing personal wellness has been something that I realize is more important for a successful curator than, and just being I don't know, just being easier on myself. So I think allowing us to tell ourselves it's okay if we don't hit that deadline, and that this is difficult, and but we're getting it done. I think just being kind to ourselves has been my biggest sort of takeaway this year. I don't know. I feel like there were many years where I was just trying so hard to be professional, project professionalism and have all the answers. And I think I've come to a place in my life and career where, it's okay to admit a mistake and acknowledge that you don't know the answer, and just say, I will find that out, or I will learn from this mistake and move forward. And I, it's, you can be a little bit vulnerable and professional at the same time, and that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel like especially in my position, just while working with ASP, beginning last spring, there were just a lot of disappointments, one after the other, having put hours and hours of like prep time into something that didn't even make it to the the promotional stage, and coming to terms with the fact that there is not going to be a clear time in the future when we'll be able to do this and pick up where we left off, and coming to terms with that reality has been hard, but I think also really valuable. I feel like I've learned a similar lesson. I'm learning that lesson to have a little bit more grace with myself and with the people I work with, because yeah, we're all doing a lot at the moment, all probably at home, feeling fatigued, and that's not just us, it's the folks who are participating in our events as well. So
yeah,
that's been good to realize and get. I mean, I, as a working student, I have the perspective of a student and as someone who's like creating events for students. So while I'm still disappointed by the things that we couldn't accomplish. We did accomplish some things, and those things some folks went to, and that's great. So let's see. Okay, I like this one. What are you looking forward to seeing in the art world in general as restrictions loosen?
I miss art fairs, and I miss going to openings and going to visit artists in their studios, and just anything that's in person. I really miss. Like I it's kind of funny because, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I miss concerts, you know, I got to get back to a concert or a sporting event. Like, I could care less about that. I don't miss concerts. I don't miss, you know, sporting events or big crowded events, but I just miss just going to museums and galleries and those kinds of things. Really, I'm excited about re-entering that world, and hope that happens soon. It seems, you know, it seems like it's happening more and more now, but
yeah. Yeah, you know, I do miss concerts, but I especially miss the art spaces as well. I feel like yeah, I feel very disconnected from art in general at the moment, and especially with I can't imagine how artists are feeling, especially the folks who are or maybe about to exhibit or had some other creative project fall through. I'm looking forward to seeing the things that would have happened in the past year but are happening now later. Yeah, I think that will be really interesting.
Yeah, I got an opportunity to go to New York just before everything shut down, and I just hold that with me as like the last hurrah. And actually, right after that, there was a symposium in Portland, like March 6th, and I was able to go down to Portland and visit with colleagues and talk about art and with students down there, and see some shows down at the art museum there. And I just feel very lucky that I had that those two excursions before everything shut down last year, because I'm like, they're carrying me through this, but I'm ready to go back out there again and see some more art.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not much more that I have to say on that other than I'm excited for whatever's going to come. I'm excited to participate. So we can move out of the pandemic questions. I know that everyone is probably tired of talking about it, but I'm curious to know if you have a personal approach or a personal philosophy towards curating. And if you do, what is that?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what was initially interesting to me as an artist. And, you know, I never really clung on to one media, you know, focus, or I was kind of always like drifting back and forth between photography and painting and mixed media. And so, you know, for me, it's really about artist concepts, and I'm drawn to their ideas before maybe the material. And, you know, I've never had, you know, a specific focus. You know, some people go into, and I have a very untraditional path to curation, toward getting to becoming a curator. So, you know, I started making and learning by doing. And so, you know, I don't have those traditional backgrounds, or, you know, I didn't do a thesis on, you know, modernist photography, or, you know, that sort of thing. So my interests are very all over the place, and I don't think I could ever work for an encyclopedic museum within a department or in that way. Like I've always been interested in working in community-based museums where it's really about, engaging the community with the art and working with artists from all backgrounds and all walks, and really just, it just changes from project to project, which makes it really exciting for me as a curator. And that's, I wouldn't say that there's an approach or a philosophy that I take through each of those projects. It's more for me being malleable as a curator and really just working with those artists or with that project in the way that feels best for that particular project. And again, I think for me, working on new projects, new installations, new work is just really exciting for me to be a part of. So if I'm developing a large group exhibition, I tend to look, if it's about a broader theme. I've done projects on themes of memory, and that particular exhibition had art from artists from all backgrounds and interests. There was craft-based work, there was work by self-taught artists, there was work from emerging advanced career artists. I just kind of look in down many different rabbit holes for the work, and that's exciting to me. I'm not set on particular styles or feels within that, as long as the work fits within that overarching theme. It's sort of, and can be brought into that conversation. I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, I feel like there's almost, I'm just guessing that there's probably not like a one size fits all approach towards curation. And I've noticed that just in some of the exhibitions that I've been a part of planning, sometimes my vision doesn't always fit with the artist's vision. And I feel like my purpose, my role has been to bring their vision to life. So it's been interesting for me as someone who's learning how to be in a gallery setting, be in a museum setting. It's been really interesting to get to interact with artists individually and see just exactly how different their visions are and their approaches are to the space in and of itself, let alone to the way that their show may look towards visitors. Some artists have a real interest in that aspect and others don't. But yeah, it's been very interesting to learn about all of it. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the exhibitions that you've worked on that have left a lasting impact on you?
Well, any project that I've been fortunate enough to work on a publication with the exhibition has always been really meaningful, and that you really get to deep dive into the research and really think about the work in a long form kind of way. When I worked at the Kohler, our projects were very, like I said, the exhibition programming was really intense. So oftentimes there wasn't, long planning times where you could really flesh out a project or an idea. And but I was fortunate to work on this project on memory that was a multi-year. There were 50 plus artists in that exhibition. We had, performance-based work, installation. There were, works about memory loss and dementia, and we worked with communities on that, and photographic memory, and it just had all of these aspects that were a part of that exhibition that I just loved developing and researching and working with those artists. And Ed Burrell's project is a big one for me because Ed and I have a really long history. You know, he's a former professor of mine, and we've known each other for 20 years. And the fact that I was able to work with him on his retrospective and catalog was really special to me. And I just hold that project in my heart. and I love seeing where his work has gone since then, and how visible it's become in the last couple years. And I think that's really exciting to see.
Yeah. You know, when was that exhibition regarding memory?
That was in 2010.
Okay. I ask because I feel like I'm seeing a lot of student artwork that deals with memory, nostalgia, and the, in some ways, the uncovering of memories. And it's something that I've seen the past like 3 years while I've been at Western. And so I was just curious if that's, I guess, in your experience, have you seen that like throughout your time working with contemporary artists, or is that something that's sort of a recent focus?
In memory,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been in there forever, but
Yeah.
you know, I don't. That's a project where ever since it was completed, you know, I never wanted to stop looking at artwork to include in that project, and I think that's probably why so many artists were in that exhibition. It was that there are just so many artists who are working with memory in many different capacities, but it would be so interesting to go back to that subject and revisit it now, because in 2010, you know, people weren't creating memory databases on Instagram, and you know, like people weren't they weren't outsourcing their memories to these devices, and you know, kind of relying on that prosthetic. And artists have been processing that over the last 10 years. So I think there was just such a lot of different avenues that have influenced the idea of memory and within art. And I think that it would be really fun to readdress that topic, and to see how the pandemic has changed, you know, this collective memory of this period of time. And you know, it takes time to get some distance from now to kind of reflect on that and how we're going to process that. But I still think that it's going to be a topic that's rich for forever.
Yeah, I was imagining that like it's probably a topic that artists have been working with for millennia. I feel like if someone's like grad project was to research instances of like memory-based artwork, they could probably write like a brief history of it if they wanted to. But it was something that just, especially in observing the past few years of BFA cohorts at Western, that's been a really popular source of inspiration for emerging artists. And I have noticed that a lot of that work deals with things that seem very relatable to all people. And then others deal a lot with technology and the influence that objects and I guess like trends have in memory. So yeah, that exhibition that you were describing just sounds very interesting. I would be curious to see all of the different variations of work that deals with the same topic. I mean, we're seeing that all the time, but yeah, that was just something that interested me. And you also mentioned Ed Burrell's work. That exhibition was really impactful for me. Edinburgh came to an art history class that I had as a freshman or a sophomore at Western. And we were able to talk about some of his work with him. And that was a great experience because I don't think I've had an experience like that since as an undergrad. And being able to interact with the maker of the object has really helped me to better understand not only Ed's work, but the work of other artists. And yeah, I don't know, that show was just so, I don't know, every single work that Ed created that was in that retrospective seemed like a world in and of itself. And I feel like I could have probably sat with each individual object for a very long time and still would have found new things within each object. So yeah, that was great to see. I feel very lucky that I was able to visit that retrospective and then work with Ed afterwards. That was pretty amazing. Yeah, those kinds of shows are my favorite. So let's see. I actually only have just a few more questions, but I'm really curious about this one. What is something in the art world in general, or museums specifically, that you believe needs to change? And how do you see that change taking place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough world right now. There are a lot of voices that have not been represented in museums and have not been heard or viewed and valued. And I think it comes from that those voices and aren't in the institutions, and so bringing in people of color to all levels of institutions needs to happen, and exhibiting artists of color needs to happen, and those more experiences and more voices need to be presented and heard, and I think there's a reckoning right now in museums that's happening, and that's a good thing. And there's a lot of scrutiny, and that's a good thing. So, and I also think that, more grace and kindness, and, giving just giving more room for that too, and just being willing to listen to views outside our own, and listen to different perspectives and be open. And I think that you could talk about that for any field, for any profession. It just is, it's all coming to a head right now. So the museum world is definitely being forced to reckon with that, for sure.
How do you see, this might be a difficult question on the spot, but how do you see the role that the Whatcom Museum has in that effort to not only welcome various voices, but to seek them out, to invite people to have a say in the Whatcom Museum and what goes on there?
Yeah, I mean, we're a smallish museum, and we have a staff of about 20 or less than that full time. And, we have conversations all the time. We're talking about it all the time internally, and developing readings and task force. And, we're trying to work from within and reach out to our Indigenous leaders. And we've, through Ed's exhibition, we've we hosted difficult public community conversations on, you know, his work, and invited the chief of police and the mayor, and we've been a forum, and we've invited people in to participate in those conversations and to be part of those conversations. I think when it comes to curation, I do my best, and we all do our best to be as transparent about, you know, communicating, you know, that we are not the authority on some of these subjects. We are a community platform, and, you know, we want to make space for those conversations. So, you know, at the moment right now, we're piloting program where anyone who identifies with an indigenous tribe can view our exhibitions for free. So we're trying to create more access and invite people into the museum who might historically not feel welcome into the museum, and to acknowledge that that is a space that has not in the past been welcome to certain communities. So I think we're doing, you know, we're doing work that's difficult and hard, but is and it makes us all vulnerable, and we're willing to fumble through it and acknowledge that we'll make mistakes at times, but we're not going to back off on pursuing providing a platform for diverse voices to be heard, and to share that with our community.
Yeah, I feel like there's a shift in the way that contemporary museums are presenting themselves. You were just speaking about the Whatcom Museum as a platform for the community, and that seems markedly different from this, I think, a real historical precedent that museums have set, particularly encyclopedic museums, as like tastemakers, as like the authority on taste, on culture, on value, beauty, and there, you know, I feel like that position, or the assumption of that position, has come under intense critique over the, you know, the past, I don't know what, like 100 years or something. And it's been great to see, or at least in my studies, to like learn about the progression of museums into the contemporary age. And so just hearing you speak about Whatcom Museum as a community-based institution, I am hoping that that is the position that not just museums, but art institutions in general continue to take on, because I really do feel like we're seeing, or at least, you know, as a visitor to museums, as someone who loves going to the museum and interacting with art, I feel like I am learning more, I'm getting more from the exhibitions just as an individual than I would have even just, I don't know, 10 years ago. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I would have been like a teenager, but
Okay.
yeah, I appreciate the position that you're articulating. And yeah, I'm really curious to see how, I'm personally curious to see how some institutions will continue the work of being not only inclusive but equitable and accessible. I feel like accessibility is one of the things that the pandemic especially has enlightened us to. And we mentioned earlier that virtual programming can really be an outlet for museums to reach out to folks that they may not have otherwise. And while it is difficult, I feel like the more people that you can reach in a meaningful way, then the better you're probably doing. Maybe that's a weird metric, but yeah, there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of good change brewing amongst museums, and I'm excited for them.
And I think, you know, smaller museums have a advantage over those big, giant, encyclopedic, you know, taste-making museums that have, you know, they're like huge ships that take a long time to right themselves. And I think when you're a smaller institution, you can, there's more malleability, and you can move in quicker ways than, and just, that's what I love about working at the Whatcom Museum, is that we can, you know, we can move, we can make choices quickly, and we can do, you know, good things, and make good choices, and we're not beholden to, like, you know, a huge giant institution that, you know, there might be people that wouldn't be willing to listen to that, you know, higher up or whatever. It feels good to work in a place where there's alignment of values across the institution.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure that having a smaller team helps and makes that possible. So yeah, I think we're at my final question. So this is something that I've asked every guest that I've spoken to on this little series. And I think it's probably one of my favorite parts. And so that is, what is something that you would like aspiring artists, museum professionals, emerging creatives to know?
Well, I think aspiring artists, museum professionals, and emerging creatives could teach me a lot about certain things that, you know, I could probably learn from. But I think when I go to, you know, speak to students at a university, or do tours with students or young professionals, I feel like I guess the ability to just be curious and open to learning and asking a lot of questions, and or even just you know, being willing to poke a little bit to those who are in you know, in positions, and provoke with good questions, I think is really important. I often find that I'll finish a conversation and ask, or, you know, engage students in a conversation, and I won't get many questions, or, you know, like about what I do, or what, you know, like and it's just interesting to me, like, or a work study student, or, you know, like that there's not a lot of questions being asked, and I think being open to asking questions and maybe there's fear there in asking questions, but I think just being open and vulnerable, and being willing to kind of poke and seek out some answers about the practicalities of a job, or, you know, what do you do on a daily basis? Like, how do you or develop a project, or, you know, like those kinds of questions. I don't really hear them all that much. So I think, you know, be willing to put yourself out there to get some of the answers that you need to help you in making decisions. I think when I was young, I didn't know what kind of careers were even out there in the arts, and, you know, like the possibilities. I didn't know what a registrar was, you know, I didn't know what a collections manager was, or a conservator. You know, these are all fields that I've learned about by being in a museum, and I think it would be wonderful if I had known about some of these avenues when I was younger. I would have been able to make, you know, choices, and, you know, or, you know, I think it's just really interesting how you don't find out about these things until later on. And so just asking questions, being open to that. That might be really cheesy and impractical, but But I also think, you know, when I was in school, I knew I wasn't going to be in school forever, and I knew I needed a job, and I wasn't being super strategic about this, but I genuinely really was interested and enjoyed the exhibition program at the Kohler, and I would go up there on a lot of weekends, and you know, I saw every time they had a new exhibition come up, I would go see it. I would read the labels, I would read what was on the walls, I would pay attention to who worked there, you know, I would pay attention to their education programming. And so I felt like I was armed when the time came when there was a position open there. I felt like I really knew that institution, like from a genuine place, because I had spent time getting to know it well in advance of when that position came up. So, you know, if you're a young professional and there's an institution that you feel you really align with and you'd love to see yourself be involved with, like volunteer or find some way to be involved there or at multiple different places, and then just, you know, a position may come up, and then you'll be in a unique position where you really understand what their mission or vision is as an institution, and you can speak from an authentic place. So
yeah, I think those are both great pieces of advice. Yeah, and as someone who's, you know, hoping to become a museum professional, what's been frustrating for me is that I feel like I didn't know that I had a lot of agency. I think it's taken me the past like couple years of the last few years of my undergrad to realize that like I can choose when to seek information, when to learn about things that I want to know about. I don't think that I realized that I didn't have to wait for someone to tell me how to do something, or I didn't have to wait for an advisor to tell me to take a certain class, that I could choose what I wanted to be interested in. And then when I started to develop that interest, there were fewer resources than I anticipated. But as you know, as I'm about to graduate, I feel like there are a ton of resources for not only for people who are looking to get a job in a creative field, but for artists themselves, musicians, makers of all sorts. There are resources, and that's something that I've learned through doing this series. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today about your experience, and yeah, I really appreciate the advice. I needed to hear it. I'm sure some other folks needed to hear it too.
It's been my pleasure. It's really been fun, and just communicating face to face is really nice. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And what you guys are doing to do this podcast is great. So I see, even with my own children who are in grade school, that, you know, there's less and less art in the schools, and what that equates to is that there's less value for art in as kids grow up. They don't see a value in learning it, but there are so many issues that you can teach through art, you know, social justice, empowering voice, and, you know, climate. There are science. There are so many different avenues that you can teach through art, and I just feel like there's a missed opportunity in the young education system that the arts aren't valued. So when I see that you're getting it out there and sharing that with the students there, that makes me happy to see.
Yeah, it's been really fun. And so unfortunately, this is my last episode. But I can only strongly encourage my successor to continue it. We'll see what the next crop of ASP folks do. But I'm sure whatever it is, it's going to be great. So yeah. Thank you again for your time, and for sharing some of your knowledge with us. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to visiting the Whatcom Museum. It's been on my mind lately since the reopen. So
Yeah, come on down.
okay, will do. All right. Thank you again. Okay.
Thank you, Newt.
Yeah. Bye,
All
Amy.
right. Bye.